Hello, folks. This is your host, Charlie Dixon. Before we get started today, we would really like your help. Please rate and review our podcast with 5 stars and make sure to share it with a friend. By spreading the word, you help us grow and reach more people, allowing others to discover the valuable insights shared in each episode. Thank you so much for being an important part of the Behavioral Health Today community.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Charlie Dixon, joined today by Dr. Graham Taylor. In this series, we bring you quick, digestible insights into mental health and societal trends, taking a relaxed approach to the issues shaping our world. Today, we're diving into a topic that's been shaping the mental health of both youth and adults, the impact of social media and technology. Today, we'll explore the challenges young people face, how parents can establish healthy boundaries around social media, and what it takes to support children and teens in building healthier relationships with technology. Graham, I am very excited to hear your thoughts as we dive into this conversation.
I am really excited to be with you. It's so fun to have these conversations, and I am looking forward to this topic. I can't think of a more important topic right now in our
Absolutely.
lives.
Absolutely. It is everywhere. And so, as we consider the development of children and teens, it's important to remember that they're growing emotionally, socially. And with social media, though, it being such a prominent part of everyone's lives, I won't just say just children's lives, but everyone's lives. What do you think are the risks and challenges that we should be aware of as both parents and educators, really?
Yeah, that's a nice setup right there. There's some really good pieces. I think there's a number. One, we know that there is a negative impact on our children's brain development. You know, their frontal lobes, the executive part of our brain, planning, reasoning, logic, judgment, anticipation of consequences, some of the reward pieces. That's not fully developed until we're 25 years old. So it's still growing. It's still plastic. So our brains are, the neuroplasticity that we talk about. So we know that with social media and being on a device, it impacts negatively their frontal lobe development, other parts of their brains as well. I also think there's other issues, like you mentioned, the emotional piece. We know that suicide, depression, anxiety have all gone up. Come on.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and suicide now is the second leading, according to CDC, the second leading cause of death amongst young people, 10 to 24.
Yeah.
We also know that I don't know about, I'm sure you've seen this.
Mhm.
Some of your population is a little bit different than mine that I see in practice, but still, I talk to a lot of parents. Their relationships with their kids have been
Suffer.
so
Yeah.
suffer that I think that's
Mhm.
the right word. I could say negatively impacted. Suffer's a better word because they
Yeah.
have suffered with this tension, fights, tantrums, all kinds of things.
Mhm.
I'm holding up my phone right now for those of you who aren't watching, but I'm holding my phone. This is the most powerful device that we have. And
Absolutely.
I tell I tell parents that behind every social media thing, or games or things there are 40 psychologists that are behavioral specialists that are telling the programmers, here's how you keep their attention. Here's how you
Mm.
reward them.
Mhm.
It's basically Vegas on steroids.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And it just affects everything. Intermittent reinforcement, bells, whistles,
Mhm.
bows, get little rewards, get a like, all these things. It
Mhm.
is addictive. So I think the development, I think the mental health piece, I think the
Yeah.
emotional piece around, comparison. Girls are particularly,
Mm.
impacted by this. I know we'll talk about this in the show. Boys have a different reaction to it in some ways, but still nonetheless, cyberbullying and just the familial impact. Those are some things come to my mind. Did you have similar experiences?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it kind of started around the time of COVID, and I think we'll get into that a little bit later, like when
Yeah.
it became so imperative and so heavy. But at that time, I was a school social worker, working in a high school. And so just to watch the difference before the shutdown times where children were just at home a lot more, and that led into more, in my experience, that led into more impact of social
Oh
media
yeah.
because you're
Oh yeah.
sitting at home, school is now on a device. while you're on the device doing schoolwork, you also have your phone on your hand because you can't see any other kid outside of your phone. Like the phone became the lifeline
That
at
was your
that point.
lifeline. Yeah,
And while it was good, it is good. It allows you to connect with other people. And in our experience as older people, I've been able to use social media to connect with people that I went to high school with that I hadn't seen
sure.
in 20 years. But on the other side of that, like you mentioned, it became so much more addictive and so much more in control of our everyday thoughts of
Yeah.
most everyone around us. Because at this point, even children as young as 3 or 4 have experiences with technology through social media or some form, whether it's YouTube or whatever it may be. And I think even we mentioned in another episode about the impact of the election and things like that. Our children even saw so many more things about the election and
Good point.
politics and division through social media and through the impacts that it had there. So it really took over. And while there are some positives, I won't, negate those. It is very developmentally negative, and it has
Mhm.
some harmful impacts on, again, not just the children, but us as adults as well.
I like this 10,000-foot view you're kind of giving us here, that during COVID, it
Mhm.
provided probably the only connection that we were allowed. If
Right.
I couldn't see you, that lose, maybe I could FaceTime you, or I could,
Yeah.
go online and connect with you there. I had no other outlets other than my family, and
Right.
we were probably, driving each other nuts. So I needed some
Yep.
outlet. But
Yep.
so what you're raising as a lifeline and something very helpful and positive to a degree that way socially, it's become kind of something that's kind of almost ensnared us in a way. It's
Yes.
something
Yes.
that's got us now,
Mhm.
and what was maybe once our only connection, we get I heard someone say the other day, someone on, the podcast that I was doing, they were saying, "We've never been more connected,
Mhm.
we've never been more lonely."
Yeah. So
And
much more
unknown.
disconnected as well. Yeah.
You notice that as well?
I have,
Yeah.
definitely, because even children, as you sit and I am fairly recently out of working in the school system, children don't even know necessarily how to have conversations with each other
No.
anymore. They'll sit in the cafeteria at lunchtime, and instead of hearing lots of children laughter and talking and engaging with each other, they're on their phones. And
Yeah.
even the engagement is like, "Oh, look at, did you see what such and such posted on their Snap or whatever?"
It's
So
not
the
about us.
engagement, no,
It's
it's
about something
not. It's not
outside of
in the
us.
moment. It's not
That's
the
right.
mindful in the moment. This is what we're doing today. So there is engagement, and I know that social media is designed to keep young people engaged, but that engagement, just like you mentioned, becomes more of like a trap,
Yes.
that children, young adults don't necessarily fully understand. Having that level of access to so much information, while it is a good thing and it provides maybe even to a certain extent a more open-minded youth,
Yes.
I
Yes.
do also think that it impacts mood and behavior and, like you mentioned, higher rates of mental health illnesses and just
Yeah.
comparison and bullying. It also brings out those negative pieces as well. So
Yeah.
speaking as a parent, sometimes it is difficult to navigate where social media loses
Mm.
its positivity, or technology period, where it loses its positivity, and how we teach our children where that line is.
I think that's a really huge piece, and you're nudging us towards the idea that maybe, parents get to have a really good role. In and of
Mm.
itself, it's neutral. It can't be harmful unless you're doing wrong things with it.
Right.
And what you're saying is maybe we can empower maybe even a closer relationship with a parent and child forming if they're going to be addressing this. How could they do it together? At the
Mhm.
same time, it's also, and I don't want to overemphasize a negative, and I don't want to sound like some old crotchety guy because I'm not, because I use it too. So if I come across that way, bear with me. And I've got 3 kids that kind of were just getting into the young adult years when the phones really kind of came in, and
Mhm.
social media really came in big ways. They were engaged with as well. But when you hear a stat like, and this is a CDC, saying the same things, that for male teens from 2007 to 2015,
Mhm.
the suicide rate went up 31%
Wow.
for males, and it went up 40% for
Mm.
females. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane. And so what we're saying is, and we don't necessarily able to say, well, it caused it, but there's a correlation. So we can say
Right.
if there's
Yep.
something a correlation, then that's significant enough. Or even the idea when you're spending, they found out if you spend more than 2 hours a day experiencing on a social media platform, you are bound to experience poorer mental health outcomes, including
Mm-hmm.
suicidal thoughts. Most kids are spending more than 2 hours a day,
Oh yeah.
on that. And most,
Oh yeah.
basically saying they're spending 4.8 hours, what the research shows. But I think it's more than that, the kids
Yeah.
I talk to. But however, I love going back to what you said earlier. Forgive me for being crotchety there for a moment. Going down this path of what if parents became involved with something
Hmm.
that is a part of our kids' life that's not going to be not a part of their life.
Right.
Maybe when does it become a part of their life and how do we navigate it with them to maybe get the best out of what it can provide by protecting at the
Absolutely.
same time protecting against. How do you do it?
Absolutely.
You got children. What do you do?
And honestly, I agree with you. It is really trying to find that balance because saying no to all devices, no to all screen time,
Yeah,
that is really just honestly pushing your child or your young adult towards it even more because it's like,
that's right.
oh, she doesn't want me to do it. So I'm going to go see what she doesn't want me
Yeah,
to
it becomes
do.
the apple, doesn't it? Yeah.
Right, right. You
Yeah.
want what you can't have. And that
Yeah.
it does not, it's not just limited to adults. It starts
Yes,
much
right.
younger than that. So really it's just about trying to find the right approach for your children. So you mentioned my own. I have an 11-year-old and a 5-year-old. Neither of them have social media access at this point. However, they do both have access to screens. My oldest plays video games. He is allowed to chat on video games with other children that he knows, other kids that he goes to school with. But I draw the line there as far as chatting. All of the contacts do have to come through dad and I. So it's not, he's opening up to the entire world because there are people there that lurk just to
You
have these
bet.
conversations and lead children way off base. But on the other side of that, I also have conversations with him. He is 11 at this point, and we started having conversations about what to be aware of, who is a child on social media, who is a child that wants to chat with you. Are you sure that this is somebody that you know? Just being aware of
Yeah.
surroundings and what could potentially happen. I know some people are like, can't believe that you have these conversations with a child so young, but I find it important to teach him now what to be aware of
Yeah.
and to acknowledge to him, like, you know what? You've been watching YouTube shorts a lot today and
Yes.
your mood is off, son.
Yes.
So we're going to have to remove that for the rest of the day because you've had enough evidently.
Yeah.
Let's go outside and play. Let's
You
make
bet.
sure that there is some level of boundary there to where you're not just sitting on social
Yeah.
media or for him, like I said, they don't have social media, but YouTube watching shorts or Roku TV also has shorts. And so it's everywhere. So I don't want you to not have it at all. I don't want to push you in the other direction where you feel completely left out. And so when your classmates are talking about the video game that they played together the night before, you have no idea about it. But I also want you to be aware of what could potentially happen, how things could affect you negatively, and then teaching them what negative looks like to them. Because a parent can say, "Oh, you're just acting bad, you can't have it." I want mine to understand, or I find it important for them to understand, you know what? My mood is changing. I need to take a break. And so trying to instill in them that self motivation or that self acknowledgement of, I feel differently about this, or I feel I want to compare myself to somebody on the short, or I want to do some of the things that they're doing. Maybe it's time for me to take a break. I should go outside and play and have that merge of both crotchety type of play. I'm with you on that. I'm a little crotchety myself. So that I need to go outside and experience the grass under my feet or feel the sun on
Yeah.
my body, hoping that in the future that he or they are able to know where those boundaries are and can exercise them without a level of, wow, I finally have freedom. I'm just going to
Yeah.
go do whatever I want.
Yeah. We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Most of us spend more time at work than anywhere else doing anything else. So why not spend that time in a job you love? Introducing Triad's Jobs Marketplace, the only job site dedicated specifically to behavioral and mental health professionals. featuring more than 1,000 open jobs from dozens of behavioral and mental health employers, and searchable by location, professional field, employment type, specialization, and more. Jobs Marketplace helps you find your next career opportunity. Full time, part time, or gig time, make the most of your time. To access Jobs Marketplace, register for your free professional account at hellotriad.com/BHT. That's hellotriad.com/BHT, and then click to Jobs Marketplace. If you're already a member of the Triad community, visit app.hellotriad.com/jobs. That's app.hellotriad.com/jobs. Visit us today and take your next career step tomorrow.
So you're talking about equipping your children, and you're talking about helping them appreciate the emotional and social and developmental aspects of this. And you can have these conversations, but you have them, in an age appropriate way. You're not
Right.
citing, some big research article, but you're
Yeah.
putting it in their speak. It's like
Yep.
what we talk about, from a mental health perspective. And we encourage folks, parents to talk to their kids about, sex. And we talked about drugs, and
Right.
parents are like, oh, if we
Right.
talk about that, they're going to go have sex and have drugs. No, they're not.
No.
Instead, they're going to make informed decisions, knowing what they didn't know before from the best source possible, mom and dad, ideally, or
Right.
whoever's in their life, to be able to
Right.
say, here's what we believe to be right. Here's our values. Here's the things that are
Mhm.
important to us in our family. We're going to raise you by these things. That's the parent's
Absolutely.
prerogative and task and requirement. And we want you to be cognizant of what's the best of this device. And also, what are the risk challenges here that we really want you to be aware of so that you can be equipped and maybe even recognize it in yourself someday? And I love what you
Right.
did too. And I've done the same thing with my child, one of my children, where in using it, they became just kind of moody and broody. And
Mhm.
where did they go?
Right, like, "You were not my kid, like, who
Um,
are you?" Yeah.
I seriously, and short of any slap therapy, I decided to take the decided to say, hey, you know what, honey? And I love what you did because I did the same thing. I talked about it being the device, not
Mhm.
something shame-based about their mood,
Right. Right.
because their mood came out of too
Right.
much time on the device, and it wasn't their fault. That's just what
Mhm.
happens. It's just what
Yep.
happens when
That's
we're
what happened.
exposed to the sun too long, I get sunburned. If I
Mhm.
expose to this too long, I get brain numbed, and my mood changes, my mental health changes, and my
Mhm.
interactions with you as my family member change. So I love what you did.
Right.
Is did the very same thing. I removed it for a period of time, and that person emerged again. Their
Yep.
persona, who they were, emerged.
Yep, and it's beautiful to see your child come back because while that detox period is happening, it is not fun for anyone, not the child, not the parent. But when they return, it is a beautiful thing to see. And while that detox or whatever is happening, I think it's important to have conversations during that time too, and even to model behavior. So as an adult, I have definitely caught myself spending way too much time scrolling. There's
Mhm.
nothing going on. I'm bored. I'm scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. And my child actually even had to say to me, like, Mom, how do you tell me I can't spend too much time on my device? And
Yeah.
you've had your phone in your hand the whole time. I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, you're
That's a
right.
pot calling the kettle black, huh?
Yeah, it's like, you know
Like,
what? You're right, son. I'll come outside with you and
right,
play because you're
right,
right.
right.
Maybe I'm different when I've spent too much time on my device as well. Like it's not just stuck with child. Like maybe it
Yeah,
happens to us as adults as well. And so being
absolutely.
open to hearing that, it was not fun to be parented by my child, but at the same time, he is right. Like, how can I tell him that, warn him of the negatives and not realize when they're happening to me as well?
Well, that tells me you guys have got some, safety and trust in your relationship, right? Where he can give you a nudge and say, "Hey, mom, you've been on that pretty long, and what do you think?" So I
Right.
like the idea that you guys can approach each other that way and be
Absolutely.
open to one another that way. And I think
Yeah.
I remember when we had our kids over, when they had their friends over, they'd be all sitting in the living room, and it would be the quietest living room in the whole city because they were all on their
Hmm.
phones. And
On the
I'd get
phones.
out this. We have these in Hawaii. We have these beautiful koa bowls. And we have a big koa bowl that sits up on one of our shelves, and I would get the koa bowl and I say, "Okay, everybody's phone in here." And they put it
Mhm.
in the so they're when they're in my house, they put the koa. That's when they were younger. Put the phones, in the bowl. And it'd be
Hmm.
kind of funny because for a little while they'd be a little bit awkward with each other. They wouldn't quite know
Yes.
what to do
Yeah.
or how to engage. It's kind of that,
Hmm.
asking someone to dance kind of thing. They were kind of awkward with one another, and then they just started on like you said, unfolding and
Hmm.
emerging and just
Hmm.
engaging the way that we want them. It's beautiful, isn't it?
It is. It's really lovely to see. And I'm happy to hear that you took that approach because a lot of times that's what happens. Kids will go hang out and they're going to play over their friend's house and they're not playing. They're just sitting on their devices. And it takes a strong parent to be able to say, "Hey kids, all right, let's try something different." Everyone is doing it. Let's all put the phones in the bowl. And one way to combat that, I know in my home, I buy lots of board games and things that they can do that are not social media based. That is stuff like Twister or about air hockey at Christmas time. So it gives them something to do where they're not
Yep.
just focused on their phone because honestly, social relationships are incredibly important. We learn lots of things from them. We learn who we want to be, some of the things that we don't want to be. And so I know social media and technology kind of act as a bridge. And I mentioned that before on how I was able to connect with people that I knew from high school or college.
Yes.
And it really does, work to bridge people together in certain ways, but it also has some challenges for social interactions, like you mentioned. So as a parent, what trying to determine what are some approaches to help balance that online and offline relationship. And I do believe that encouraging, I won't say forcing, but encouraging kids to put down the device and do something together that is not around a device. Maybe it is going outside to play basketball or going for a walk
Sure.
together or playing a
Yeah.
board game. I think it's important to encourage and foster that balance between the two types of ways to, foster a relationship.
Yeah, I think that's so good. I know we're winding down just real quick, but I just want to throw one thing in that I think kind of rides on that a little bit. If we don't do the things that you're describing and we don't kind of raise our kids that way, life is hard.
Yeah.
When we become adults, life is hard. It requires emotional maturity, requires a
Mhm.
good, EQ, emotional quotient. It requires us to have good communication strategies. It requires us to have good problem solving skills. It requires us to have good self control and be able to soothe ourselves, to postpone
Yep.
gratification. It requires us to have an understanding and empathy for other people, and if we're not developing those early, if we're, looking down all the time, if we're not engaging in ways, our growth gets stunted. And those
Mhm.
areas that we need to be developing now when they're kind of in their plasticity state, when they
Yep.
become adults, they're going to be ill-equipped to address some of the things that are going to be part of their adulting.
Absolutely.
So I love the idea of the balance. I love the idea of there being a place for it. I love the idea maybe where parents can come and do it with their kids and monitor these
Yeah.
things.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And building that healthy relationship with technology, it's not going anywhere. So trying to completely remove it, I don't know that that's the best way either. So really just trying to, like you mentioned, creating a level of balance between technology, social media, and real life experiences like extracurricular activities or a focus on studying or the arts, focusing on not just social media, making sure that us as families come together and do things as families without having a device in front of our face, I think will help to continue to build healthy relationships with technology and really improve overall well being.
That's so good. I couldn't agree with you more.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Graham. I've really enjoyed this interchange about our insights today. And I hope that our listeners walk away with a deeper understanding of how social media and technology impact the youth and even take away some helpful strategies to support younger people in their lives. It's clear that with the right approach, we can equip the next generation to navigate the digital world in a healthy way. But before you go, please take a second to leave a review because we'd love your help. Please share the podcast with a friend. And by spreading the word, you help us grow and reach more people, allowing others to discover the valuable insights shared in each episode. Thank you for being such a huge part of the behavioral health community. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Tried Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.